Well, we have in the studio Tom Moyane's lawyer, Eric Mabuza, to talk to us about perhaps whatever response they may have to what has emerged this week. Prior to that, but also the latest news that there is a recommendation on the table. The inquiry chairperson has already asked the president to consider firing Tom Moyane. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for your time. I don't know if you want to respond specifically to the testimonies of the past 2 days, today and yesterday, around IT.
No, good evening, Vuyo, and thank you for inviting me to the studio. I'll pass about the testimony. I want to deal with the recommendation by Mr. Nugent to the president.
Let's deal with that. Apparently, according to the report, we haven't seen the report ourselves, but apparently it's recommending that the president consider firing Tom Moyane.
You're quite correct that we received a letter from the president sometime last week, I think it was on Friday, where he asked for our representation on the recommendation by Mr. Nugent. We were quite shocked that Mr. Nugent recommended as he did, because what he has done is really to undermine both the president and Advocate BAM SC. You will remember that the president set two processes, one, the Nugent process, as well as a disciplinary inquiry before BAM SC. I have no doubt that if the president wanted Mr. Nugent to deal with employment issues, he would have said so in his terms of reference. But he best left that to Advocate BAM. You'll also remember, Vuyo, that from the beginning, our complaint has always been about the double jeopardy that we fear that Mr. Moyane will face as a result of the two inquiries. Also in his ruling of, I think, the 2nd of July this year, Mr. Nugent assured us that he will not trample on the issues that are before BAM SC. You know, the next thing we hear is that he's made a recommendation without even coming back to us to say, oh, he's changed his mind and now he wants to recommend it to the president of our removal. That is quite outside his powers.
Let's talk about the double jeopardy, which goes to the heart of your opposition to virtually everything that has been happening. You don't think, even with the benefit of hindsight, that perhaps if you had agreed to participate, right, to form part of these two processes, instead of opposing them, then maybe both platforms, assuming that Mr. Tom Moyane is correct in saying that he is not the guilty party here. He has done everything that he could do properly, legally, and so on. Do you not think that the two avenues could have actually provided you with the platform to say the things that he wanted to say?
No. In fact, if you look at the recommendation of Mr. Nugent,
let's just forget about the judge's recommendation for a second and talk about what has led us to where things are right now. In the main, it's been Mr. Moyane's refusal to participate in the two because of what you're saying is double jeopardy. And I'm asking you that even with the benefit of hindsight, do you not think, or does Mr. Moyane not think, that perhaps he should have participated in the two processes, for that would have given him two platforms to actually clear the air, to set the record straight, to put his side of the story?
In fact, if you look at our opposition from the beginning, it's always about unfairness. But when now you look at the recommendation of Nugent, what it in fact does is to validate our complaint from the beginning that you can't have two processes looking at the same issue. What Mr. Nugent has done now is to, in fact, confirm that fear that we had. So our stance was quite correct, that we should not be subjected to two processes which deal with the same issue.
But I mean, you've approached the Constitutional Court. We don't know what will come out of that process. Let's take a hypothetical situation here. You lose at the Constitutional Court. Then what? won't you or won't he live to regret having taken the decision not to, subject himself to these two processes?
What makes the whole recommendation surprising is that you'll remember 2 weeks ago we appeared before BAM SC and we applied for a postponement. And he took a very practical approach to postpone the inquiry pending what the Constitutional Court was going to say. You would have expected a retired judge, a former judge, to have taken a practical approach the same way as BAM. In fact, you would have expected the advocate to get it wrong, not the judge. But in this case, you have an advocate who took a very pragmatic approach to the whole thing to say, let me not second guess the Constitutional Court, what the Constitutional Court is going to say. Imagine if the Constitutional Court comes back and it vindicates our claim. The entire Nugent inquiry would have been a complete waste of resources.
Pragmatic, you may think, the chairperson of the disciplinary hearing may have been, but what Judge Nugent, or the stance that he took, is not illegal either, just like an interim report is not illegal.
Well, the Constitutional Court will tell us that, whether what is done is lawful or not. You'll remember that one of the challenges that we make before the Constitutional Court was his initial threat to make this recommendation. Now we know that he's made that recommendation. So that is going to form the subject matter of the discussion before the Constitutional Court.
Okay.
Fortunately, we expect that the president has called on us to make representation. We expect the president to adopt a practical approach to the whole matter, not to second guess the Constitutional Court. You'll also remember that at the beginning we were accused of stalling the process.
Which some people say even the Constitutional Court challenge is part of that.
It can't be part of that because we've taken it to the highest court. If we lose, that may be the end of the matter for that. We didn't take it to the lower courts where we would have rights of appeal all the way to the Constitutional Court. To show our seriousness, we've taken the matter right to the apex court to decide once and for all whether the approach that has been adopted in this regard, the double jeopardy complaint that we've made, has any merit.
But then, why weren't you as pragmatic as you are asking other people, in this case, Judge Nugent, to be? And perhaps say, why don't we have one process, right? And deal with that, and then perhaps, if there's a need, move on to the next one. You seem to want to stop everything and anything. It was your way or the highway, wasn't it?
No, in fact, that's what we suggested the president to suspend. We didn't even say stop. To suspend one process until it's completed, and usually you suspend the last one. You'll also remember that the other complaint that we made before Mr. Nugent was the involvement of Mr. Katz, that he was a conflicted party. It was not a question of us not wanting to participate. Now we know, thanks God from the media, that Mr. Nugent met with Mr. Pravin Gordhan outside of the inquiry. That the Constitutional Court must pronounce on whether that is proper. So it's not just, it was never a question of stalling. It's been a principled opposition to what we perceive to be unfair against Mr. Moyane.
Can I take it for granted that you're going to be telling the president that he shouldn't fire Mr. Moyane?
You know, whenever we've been called to make representation, we've never ignored that. We have motivated, gave a detailed reason why the president should not act in a particular way. You'll remember sometime the president acceded to our request to await the outcome of the BAM inquiry. So, the president would have seen that our motivation had substance. But what is very, very concerning about what Mr. Nugent has done is to undermine both the president and Mr. BAM. You may ask yourself, in light of this recommendation, what is the purpose of the BAM inquiry anymore? What is he going to do? What job will he have if Mr. Nugent could recommend that? And he makes this recommendation in the absence of evidence from Mr. Moyane. Let me also give you another bizarre thing. His inquiry has not finished. It's interim. It's in the middle of the inquiry. imagine in the next 2 days if we have a whole lot of people turning up at the inquiry to tender evidence in support of Mr. Moyane. What is he going to say about his initial recommendation? It's quite illogical. It's quite illogical.
Okay, that's right.